So we are going to go to Idaho. And we're going to talk to Seth, who is a theist. And Seth, you have something that you want to ask us. So you are on the line with Jamie and Jimmy. Please go right ahead.
What's up, y'all? I was just wondering, on the video, were you meaning to state or imply that the scientific method is what leads to conclusions?
Generally speaking, yeah. I mean, I don't think that you always come up with a conclusion when you imply the scientific method, but basically, when you follow the steps of coming up with a conclusion, or at least testing your hypotheses, you are left with something that's gained from, questioning the hypothesis, performing your experiment, doing the testing and measuring, and finally conducting your analysis that would lead to a conclusion.
It's the best method that we have right now. Not perfect, but, best we've got.
So this might be kind of circular, I guess, but what is it that makes that conclusion, I guess, likely to be true? Obviously, I agree that it won't always be true, but say I took, say my hypothesis was that alcohol is bad, and I took a bunch of old ladies and gave them alcohol for a week, and then I took a bunch of other old ladies and gave them water for a week, and those old ladies that I gave alcohol lived, but for whatever reason the ones that I gave water died, right? I wouldn't logically then conclude that alcohol is bad and the water killed those ladies. So,
but have you done that? I mean, is that even really worth asking? Has that experiment been done?
Well, I mean, I think that there have been experiments showing that water is, healthier, I guess, than alcohol can be.
Well, I would say so, right? And I would say that I acknowledge that there have been tests done in the past that have later been proven wrong, right? Or have been changed. But that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the scientific method. You can come up with a conclusion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be true. I take issue with the example you gave because I don't think it's realistic, and it's just kind of a big stretch. But I'm not one who would not admit that conclusions are wrong and need to be changed. And I'm being a little bit rude because I actually want to give this over to Jamie, but that's my 2 cents on that. I'm going to pass it off to our co-host.
Sure thing.
Well, one of the wonderful things about the scientific method of the repeated attempts to disprove what is assumed. That's the thing about science. It's never to try and prove something. It's to try and disprove something. Something is only seen as robust under the scientific method if it stands up to continual scrutiny. So let's say you had your 5 old ladies on alcohol, 5 old ladies on water, and the water ladies, one of them had a heart attack, and therefore you could potentially conclude that water is more dangerous than alcohol. Well, then other scientists will come along to try and disprove that theory, and they would quite easily. That's the point. You aren't ever going to let something stand that doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And they will point out errors in your methodology. Your sample size is too small. Your testing period is too short. You don't eliminate enough of the external variables. And that's one of the wonderful things about how science is performed. You don't just come up with a hypothesis, test, and make a conclusion. That conclusion is then put out to your peers, who will then try and disprove it again and again and again. And if they fail, then it becomes a theory, not until it has passed that rigorous testing. And that's why I very much like it.
So I guess that kind of leads back to my question, though, of if it's always a matter of, okay, you've done this test, it's either been disproven or it's been proven, someone later on down the line can come and disprove it with whatever other new things, right? So right now we don't have the ability to go to Mars. Later down the line, if we get the ability to go to Mars, they've done tests, they've done stuff that has disproven what we currently might not have proven. So if it's always a matter of more time and more time, how can we say anything now that science has concluded is correct?
We can't. Every theory is the best model we have to comport with what we observe, and none of them are perfect. None of them. They can always be improved upon. However, they are the best approximation to what we observe based on the techniques and information that we have available. And we can pragmatically see that they are useful. The same thought process that you are trying to criticize has allowed you to talk to us, because without the scientific method, we wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't have webcams and microphones and everything that we rely on in our modern day. And this is one of the things that really bugs me when people try and cast aspersions on the scientific method, saying, oh, you don't know exactly what's going on. You can't be completely sure. While completely relying on the fruits of that thought process in things like technology and medicine and food science and everything. It just blows my mind. The whole idea of a here's the thing that gets me. A theist disputing the veracity of evolution on Twitter, not realizing the irony that if the scientific method was not a good thing, Twitter wouldn't exist.
So I'm actually not arguing against the scientific method. I 100% agree that it is good, it's useful, we need it. I wouldn't have any of the stuff I have. I'm asking more in the same ways that you don't trust whatever religion because it doesn't hold up to things we have done now. Why do you trust the science even though you fully agree that later on down the line it could have the same thing that religion's done?
Well,
do you see what I'm there?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to this because I think there are a couple of things that you're kind of skipping over. So one, the idea of peer review is a really important one that Jamie brought up because, the scientific method can be, well, peer reviewed, but not necessarily the scientific method, but the conclusion that comes from it. And that brings me to my second point. You're arguing proof and conclusion, right? And you're asking, well, does the scientific method lead to conclusion? But then you're kind of interchanging the word proof. And we're not necessarily saying that we're always going to get 100% accuracy or 100% proof of whatever thing that we're looking into. We're just saying that our observation of the evidence or of the things we're testing leads us to think something about that thing being tested. The problem with religion is that there's not anything to test, and that's a very big problem to have. We don't have access to a deity, and we don't have multiple sources of something that leads us to believe that this story or some of the miracles that maybe take place in some of these stories are true. And that is the conclusion. So I guess by applying religion to the scientific method, I would say, well, I've got very little to test. And my conclusion is that it's probably very unlikely that any of this happened. I hope that answers your question.
I do agree with that. I agree that holding religion to the scientific method doesn't make sense any more than, asking a cook to change your oil and a mechanic to bake you a creme brulee doesn't make any sense. Why would you hold a philosophy to a science?
Well, I will go back and also say that it's not just a matter of not meeting scientific standards that I have a problem with religion. It's being a human being and knowing what I know about human beings. It's through observation of mass movements that have taken place in history, the way that people use power politics and dogmas to kind of influence others and improve upon their own positions, and then conduct atrocities in relation with that. I think that has to go, that kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that not only can we not prove some of these things scientifically, but we've also got a lot of these poor human qualities that really make it obvious that these religions are just nothing more than a tool. And so before I go down a rabbit hole or a tangent, I've kind of put a lot on you. Please let me know if you want to respond. Otherwise, I want to open it back up to my co-host, Seth.
Yeah, no worries. I'm good. I don't want to take up too much of y'all time if you have other callers.
Oh, no, don't worry. We'll let you know if we can't take you anymore.
The one thing I would say, and I'm going to take it broader than the social impact of religion, is that from where I sit, religion is not very dynamic. It is based on dogma. It is based on a set of rules and dictates that are very slow to change. And they are often proven wrong. The lack of dynamism in religious dogma across the board does not comport to our evolving understanding of the world around us. Science moves from strength to strength. The understanding we have on many things has changed very rapidly in only the last 10, 15, 20 years. But Catholicism has been the same for 500, Protestantism for 200. Even the newer religions are a decade, 2, 3, 4, 100 years stuck in their ways. So when you compare these two methods of seeking truth, one based on dictate and dogma, and the other based on observation, testing, and continual improvement, I know which one I'm going to put my faith into. And by faith, I mean trust, not believing something without evidence. So what do you say to that, Seth?
If changing is the basis of, so religion is, hard to believe because it hasn't changed, and despite things coming against it. Let's just take the scientific method specifically, right? That hasn't changed for a good while. I mean, we're talking 16th century. It's been a minute. So that hasn't changed, right? It's still observe, hypothesize, test.
The method hasn't changed, but the conclusions drawn from it have. However, the method of religion, dogma, and dictate haven't changed, but the conclusions stay the same. So it's not the method, it's the result. So what do you think about that?
So, I don't know. I don't know if you'll like this. What's the word? Hypothetical. Say God was real, right? And we all talk to him every day, and every day he says, do the same stuff. Pray, read your Bible, all that kind of thing, right? Methodology doesn't change. Conclusion doesn't change. That doesn't, not changing doesn't inherently mean that the thing is false, right? 1 + 1 hasn't changed from equaling 2 for forever, right?
But if the testing methodology is sound, you say, well, God's saying read your Bible, say your prayers, and he's interacting with us every day. If we go with the scientific method of testing what we see, if God turns around and says, kill everyone in your country, you might go, hang on a second, that doesn't comport with what I saw yesterday. I'm not going to quite follow that. Whereas if you go with dictate and dogma, you go, oh, God says I should kill everyone in my country, so I'm going to go and do that. So I still put my trust into that which allows me to question things every time I encounter them and never make a full assumption.
I think I agree with that too as a theist. I don't want to just, take immediate word for it. I'll still do my own research into it. Now, my own research being somewhat anecdotal and all of that, right? Say I saw my great grandma as a ghost, right? Like that's anecdotal, right? It's not going to mean anything to you. I didn't, by the way. It's
experiential too. I mean, that doesn't really do anything for us either.
Yeah. Just because I might follow a dogma and you don't, it doesn't mean that my dogma is false and thus your lack of dogma is right, doesn't it? Like,
well,
I guess
our method allows us to analyze your dogma, and if it is analyzed and found to be sound, then cool. But it's analyzed and found to be wrong, we'll say it's wrong. And we can do that over and over and over again. That's the point of scientific method. We can analyze, assess, improve. We are never stuck to a particular dogma. Who knows what may come of things? We may completely overturn certain things that we assume to be correct right now, and we will accept it. Bad science is only ever countered by good science, and religion has never, ever brought us to an actual truth.
But I'm a little confused there, because wouldn't you have just stated that science hasn't either by talking about how, it could change?
Well, the problem, I'm sorry, Jamie, there's one thing that we're leaving out here, and that's the scientific method can't really be applied to any religion right now. Maybe someday it can, but we just don't have anything that we can test. So the lack of ability or the inability to apply the scientific method to something that we can't prove is not a failure of the scientific method. It's a failure of the dogma or of the religion to give us something that we can test. Otherwise, it's just kind of made up. And that's really where we stand. In the sense that we're looking for someone to give us the proof, right? We're having this conversation and we're inviting people on today to give us the proof so we have something to test and we have something to apply the scientific method to. Then maybe we can come up with a conclusion. Even proof, who knows? Jamie?
I just say, look at the track record. How many human problems truly have been solved by the dogma of religion, and how many have been solved by the proper application of the scientific method? The scientific method has brought us things like penicillin, telecommunications, all kinds of theories around the way that humans work, evolution, anthropology, business ethics, everything. Whereas religion has given us a set of rules that have become more and more out of date, irrelevant. Look at the 10 Commandments. Like, how many of those actually apply to us right now? 2, 3, maybe.
6.
But not all 10.
Of the 10.
So
10. I mean, if you're an atheist, obviously you don't care how many gods there are. Or would be, I guess.
I think we're getting
penicillin, which
I think we're getting a little off topic. Go ahead, though. Go ahead. Let's move on past that.
You brought up penicillin, which I find ironic considering Fleming was a Christian.
Doesn't matter. Christianity didn't bring him to penicillin. His scientific mind brought him to that.
Yet he considered his science to be an act of worship.
Good for him, but there's no way he can prove that. Whether someone believes in a higher power or not does not impact the way they interact with the world, other than maybe some of their motivation. Oh, I was brought to this by the grace of God, but you can't prove it.
Yeah, the Christianity didn't bring him to penicillin.
Yeah.
So had he not devoted, so one of his quotes, "My whole life has been devoted to discovering something in the service of religion, and I find it a great pleasure." So had he not been religious, he wouldn't have devoted his life to discovering something in the service of such. Therefore, he might not. I mean, obviously, this is.
Seth, I was a theist for half my life. All right, maybe more than that. I've done good things. I did good things when I was a theist, and now I'm an atheist, and I still do good things. The fact that I believed in something really wasn't necessary for me to do good things.
Correct. There's a difference between being necessary and being involved, though. Like, I read a
Christianity,
book.
but I get it, but I think what Jamie and I are both saying is that the Christianity was not involved. And I disagree if you're going to say that it was, because we had a man who used the scientific method to produce something that Christianity did not. He didn't get the formula for penicillin from the Bible.
Correct. But
Okay, well, we can't give credit to Christianity where it's not due. That's a misnomer. I mean, that's a misallocated credit, if you will. Christianity has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, there's plenty of things that we use every day that are, if we were to use the logic of, oh, their faith brought it to them, well, you're going to have to thank Allah and Muhammad for the number 0 and algebra in general.
I was just thinking that. Yep. I was just thinking that. Yeah, the Arabic numbers that we learn throughout our lives
equate to their belief being true.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I'm grateful that they believed it. Yeah, my bad. I ain't done this before. I would be grateful that Muhammad believed what he believed to allow for the Islamic Golden Age, which allowed for plenty of great things. It also allowed for plenty of awful things, just as Christianity has. So in that, I don't distinguish people's actions based upon their beliefs from their beliefs. If I believe something and thus I act upon it, that belief has led me to do what I have done. In the same way, if I don't believe something and thus I don't do something based upon that, that hasn't led me there.
So you are a utilitarian in that it doesn't matter whether something is true or not, as long as it has utility.
Correct. I like, for example,
I really can't get on board with that, mate. We've got to ask more of ourselves than that.
I consider myself mostly Kantian, but I also somewhat, I don't know. I find I have two sides of, on one hand, I think, Kantianism, and on one hand, I think that, I guess in the selfish way that many people do it, if everyone agreed with me, everything would be fine, which I don't like that because it wouldn't, but...
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Kant. The categorical imperative always leads to things like not lying to the Nazis when they ask you if there's a Jew in your house, kind of thing. Like, oh, my categorical imperative is that I don't lie, so never lie. And then you tell the truth to people who shouldn't know the truth.
That lying is a categorical imperative, though.
But everyone comes to their own categorical imperative. I'm not a big fan of Kant. I'm sorry.
And the emphasis on morality with Kant, don't you think that you would have an obligation to not support these dogmas that lead to atrocity if you had some kind of moral responsibility? I mean, I feel like the utility of Christianity. Go ahead.
I don't support dogmas that lead to atrocities.
Okay, but you would be grateful that Muhammad was Islamic or was Muslim so that we could come up with Arabic numbers, but you also at the same time don't support his dogma. That's impossible. They're mutually exclusive. The Quran says, one of the ways to get into paradise is to kill a non-believer.
Yep.
So there's no utility. There shouldn't be any support then for Islam if you have a moral responsibility not to support that dogma. But you find its utility useful in leading us to understanding mathematics. How do you support?
So Islam is, I guess, the belief that the Golden Age Islamics had in Islam that led to Golden Age discovery, the belief that, Renaissance era Christians had that led to the Renaissance, all of that stuff, Babylon and their Golden Age, any Golden Age tied to whatever general civilization at the time, right? Despite that civilization doing bad things, I disavow the bad things, and yet I also say there are good things that they have done, right?
Okay. But those good things that were done were not done because of those religion. It was done because that's just what the circumstances yielded. That's just what life came up with. Right. And it sounds to me like you're saying that the dogma itself was not necessary for the good things to be done, which is a departure from where we started already. Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, and from a similar thing, a lot of people especially the ones that want to disprove the veracity of evolution, will point to the fact that Darwin and his peers used evolution theory and anthropology to essentially be massive racists. But we have left behind those parts of that theory that are wrong through, again, peer review. But you can't leave behind parts of a religious dogma without having a schism. So, again, religion is stagnant, religion is static, religion is dogmatic, and you have to accept all of it or none of it. You can't just pick and choose. So, how do you square that, Seth?
Isn't that literally the entire thing that Jesus did? Is he came in and said to the Pharisees that, like, nah, y'all are not doing what you're supposed to. You just think you are.
He also said, slaves, be good to your masters, even the cruel ones. And we can go into that New Testament is not an entire refutation of the Old Testament. And the fact is, he also said that not a jot or tittle of the law shall be changed until all has come to pass, and he hasn't come back. So, no, the Bible is a complete work that, I mean, if you want to disregard everything before Jesus, then we disregard the 10 Commandments. And there's not a lot of Christians who would be down with that jive. So there we go. That's my last word.
It's not what I said, though. But
Seth
got off topic of the scientific method, so
so Seth, I just want to recap. So I really appreciate your call. First of all, the scientific method, we use it to come up with conclusions. Those conclusions don't mean proof. The important thing there is that we can take our results and give it to everybody, and they can get back to us on whether there's any veracity there or if we miss something. This is very important for the process, and I'm sure that you understand this. I don't mean to sound condescending. I just want to kind of bring this back to, where we started. And that's a beautiful thing. We get to keep moving forward. We end up with things like penicillin and things on Mars. And so we don't get that with religion. We have nothing to test, nothing to peer review. Instead, we have horrible, horrible things that happen despite the many good things that can come from people who might practice a religion. That doesn't mean that religion was necessary. And we can't get on board with the utilitarianism. So this has been a great call, Seth. I want to ask you something, though, Seth. Number one, would you consider calling back another time?
Yeah, it depends on the topic, of course.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really happy to hear that, because this was a good call, and I want you to be able to kind of engage like this with the rest of our hosts, and continue this dialogue.